Now back to our coverage of Canton Confidential, the Karen Reed murder trial. Today, jurors in the case left the Dedham courtroom and were taken to Canton to see a key location where Reed's boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, was found dead.
So they saw a few other things as well. Right here, jurors saw this black Lexus SUV. It was parked outside the house where O'Keefe, his body was found. The trip also included a stop at the Waterfall Bar and Grill. That's important because that was the last place that John O'Keefe was seen alive. But today it also featured more testimony from first responders and from firefighters as well. Let's welcome back NBC 10 trial analyst Sue O'Connell. Sue, you were in court for us. For folks who are working, they're just getting home, turning on the TV. What new information did you learn, or did the jurors learn today?
Well, Colton, thankfully for my sake, and I imagine for some of the sakes of the jurors, the Judge Cannoni moved along any prosecution questions asking about the weather conditions, which we have established. But more importantly, the jurors were introduced today to testimony from the first responders about a relationship one had with the daughter of the owner of the house where John O'Keefe was found, that Karen Reed has multiple sclerosis, that Reed referred to O'Keefe as her husband as she was on the way to the hospital. They were not married. That Reed made comments about one of her friends, Carrie Roberts, who was at the scene with her, that Reed denied taking alcohol or drugs, and that she said she had an argument with O'Keefe and she was worried that she couldn't take care of O'Keefe's niece and nephew alone, and that the responders wrote a Section 12 order, which is an involuntary commitment order. They wrote that for Karen Reed.
I want to ask you about that, the information that a Section 12, which is an involuntary commitment order, was written up by the first responders. What was that they say that they saw that prompted that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the Section 12 is an emergency restraint and hospitalization of someone who is posing a serious risk or serious harm by reason of mental illness. So first responders testified that Reed said she made threats against her life, saying, "I don't want to live anymore. I don't want to live anymore if my husband dies." Responders went on to say she was very distraught and very upset.
All right, let's talk about the defense here, because they've done objectively a pretty solid job poking holes in the narrative here. So how did the defense respond to all of that testimony?
Well, first, they made it clear that it's understandable. Look, no matter what you think happened to John O'Keefe or who did it to him, it's understandable that Reed would be reacting that way at the scene. And they pointed out that on cross-examination, they pointed out that they were asking if Reed was fixated on whether O'Keefe was dead and if describing her as grief-stricken at the scene was appropriate. And they testified yes. And they testified that they were trying to give her hope that O'Keefe was still alive. This is also how the defense was able to introduce that information that Reed had MS by asking a responder to read the medical report. So it seems today that the prosecution has picked up its stride a bit, and all of this new information and the first week of testimony closing gives the jurors a lot to think about this weekend.
A lot to think about indeed. NBC 10 trial analyst Sue O'Connell. Sue, thank you.
You're welcome.
And we want to remind everyone throughout the trial you can catch a full recap of testimony every weeknight, 7 o'clock, including tonight right here on NBC 10 Boston. NBC 10 NEC and our sister station, they're going to have complete live coverage of the trial. This is important. It's unedited, gavel to gavel, so that you can infer and make your own opinions here. Again, we're carrying all of that testimony live on NECN, NBC10Boston.com, as well as our streaming platforms, including Roku, Peacock, and Samsung TV. You can also find a complete timeline of the case at NBC10Boston.com.